Hello, I'm Katrina Anderson from Mills and Reeve, and I'm here today with Steph to talk about gene editing.
Hi Katrina, hi, I'm Steph Caird, a partner at Mills and Reeve in the Life Sciences team. I have spent some time in-house at Bayer Crop Science, so this area is quite interesting to me. And one of the things that has developed recently in this area is the Genetic Technology Precision Breeding Act, which received Royal Assent last year. We are now going to start seeing a shift from the previous position where GMO was bad, in inverted commas, because they're recognising that actually it's not the technology that we need to be worried about, it's the effect that things will have on people. So there's a real shift from thinking that generally anything that to do with gene editing is to be scared of. It is now recognising that biotechnology has moved on, and actually we're ending up with stable plant and animal breeds that have been genetically edited, but it would be in a similar way to a selective breeding programme. So I'm quite excited about this from a regulatory perspective, but Katrina, why don't you tell me how that might impact the food industry?
Yeah, and for the food industry, this is huge, because the Precision Breeding Act actually, as you say, it carves out only for the purposes of plants, which is really important. There is provision for animals, but that legislation is on hold. So at the moment we're talking about plants, so primarily crops that can be gene edited and in time brought to market as a food. And although we don't know exactly what that looks like, what we do know is that the Food Standards Agency has been empowered to create a route to market for these precision-bred organisms, or PBOs, to be brought to market as foods without having to go through onerous approvals processes like novel foods. That doesn't mean that they can all be brought to market in that way. What we understand is there's going to be a series of questions that needs to be asked about that gene-edited crop or plant to establish whether they can go through, if you like, the express Tier 1 route, where they don't need approvals, or whether they need to go through a route which looks a lot more like a novel foods approval process.
And do you think we're going to see much difference between the different devolved nations, or do you think we're going to end up with a fairly cohesive approach to this?
We don't know, because obviously the Precision Breeding Act is an England-only piece of legislation. And what we do know is that the Scottish Parliament have a very different approach to gene editing. They are more concerned about it, and they would like to see more EU alignment. And in particular, they are not happy with the fact that when these products are brought to market as a food, they won't be labelled as gene edited. So they are concerned about this legislation being brought through. But we do have the Internal Markets Act. And that says that if you can lawfully put a product on the market in England, gene edited or not, but in this case gene edited, then you can sell that in Scotland, at least in that form that you put it on the market. So that should mean that products which are brought to market using the Food Standards Agency approvals process, put on the register as it is required by the legislation, should be able to be sold in Scotland. But that is a little untested, and we are going to have to wait and see a little bit how that evolves. It may be that in due course some political agreement is reached with Scotland whereby there is some kind of equivalent legislation, or perhaps they come to an agreement on the labelling, which seems to be a particular sticking point, that means that the Scottish Parliament is more comfortable with this. But we will have to wait and see.
Well, the labelling point is presumably more around consumer awareness and transparency rather than actually an underlying concern relating to the products.
It is, and it reflects really different schools of thought on how to best get consumer acceptance. So I think everyone agrees that gene editing, as carved out in the legislation as distinct from GMO, is safe. So it is not a question of that. But at the same time, there is an acknowledgement that consumers, if you go and ask them, and many people have done surveys on this, want to see that information on the label. The position taken by Westminster, which is filtered through to the Food Standards Agency, is that since this is safe and there are no additional risks, there's no need to have that labelling, notwithstanding the consumer desire to have it. Scotland is kind of taking its cue from the EU, and they are saying that they feel like mandatory labelling of these products is appropriate to give consumers that understanding and transparency. And of course, there's a school of thought that will in time build consumer confidence. But it's become a little bit of a fraction between those two.
Yeah, but it would give consumers a genuine choice if they did have it.
Of course,
explicitly
and that
on
is
the
the
label.
argument, yes, in favour. And we'll just have to see how it comes out in the long term and what we end up having to do with the labels for these products.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.